My workbench has a finish I redid 2 summers ago, and I'm picky about it. I know where every burn mark is, every dent, every place the grain catches light wrong. That's why the first lie was impossible to miss. I saw a fresh scratch under my lamp, bright and raw, and it hit me like a slap. 3 inches long, sharp edges, the kind you get from dragging metal when you're not paying attention. The printed photo in my hand showed the same bench, the same lamp, the same little solder burn near the edge, but the surface was smooth where the scratch was supposed to be. Not hard to see, not maybe glare, just clean. I lined the photo up with the corner of my vise and a knot in the wood, and the scratch landed dead center on a spot the picture insisted had never been damaged. I was still trying to build a normal explanation when the scratch vanished. It didn't fade. It didn't blur. The bright line of raw wood filled in from one end to the other, like somebody brushed finish across it, except it moved wrong. Like the repair was being pulled into place instead of applied. For 1 second, there was a razor-thin line of dust sitting on top of the new surface, dust that had been trapped down inside the scratch. And then the dust slid sideways and scattered, because the groove it had been sitting in didn't exist anymore. I didn't touch the bench. I didn't move the photo. My hands were hovering like that would keep me honest. I put 2 fingers on the spot anyway. Smooth, slightly tacky, like varnish that hadn't fully cured. And that made it worse, because it meant the world hadn't just hidden the scratch, it had replaced it, with a version where it had never been there, but the timing was still wrong. I looked at my camcorder screen, timestamp in the corner, the bench in frame, the scratch disappearing in real time. That's the moment it stopped being a weird story and became a problem. The tote had arrived an hour earlier, dropped on my porch by a guy named Dennis, who looked like he'd been rehearsing what to say and still hated every word. He didn't come inside. He didn't even step over the threshold. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets and kept glancing past me into the hallway, like he expected somebody else to answer the door behind me. He said it came from an estate clear-out in Lantern Bend. He said it was marked for trash and he didn't feel right tossing it, not with my name on a note inside. When I asked why it ended up here, he swallowed hard and said the sheriff's office told him to stop bringing them junk.
Don't open the app.
What app?
You'll know. If you open it, you'll know.
He left right after that, gravel popping under his tires until his taillights vanished between the trees. I carried the totes straight to my workshop, because Lauren and Emma were upstairs and I wasn't bringing some stranger's junk into the living room. Lauren was reading Emma a book, and the cabin sounded normal. Heat ticking, fridge humming, the kind of quiet that usually calms me down. It didn't. I set up like I was handling evidence. Nitrile gloves, notebook, my DSLR on a tripod aimed at the bench, the camcorder rolling with a timestamp burned into the video, my own phone on airplane mode, screen down, because I didn't want anything trying to pair, ping, or get cute. Inside the tote were 3 devices and a bundle of printed photos held together with a rubber band. One cheap Android with the back cover missing. One older phone with a cracked screen. A small tablet with a shattered corner. On top of the photos was a note written in heavy felt tip on lined paper. Don't open the app. Don't fix anything. If you already did, stop. No name, no number, just that. The cheap Android powered on with no passcode prompt, no SIM, no accounts, no carrier. The date was wrong by a year, and the battery was sitting at 87% like it'd been charged yesterday. On the home screen was a white app icon with a black shape inside it, like a cutout. No name under it. I scrolled past it and scrolled back, and for a blink the icon warped, stretched taller, then snapped back to a perfect square. It did it again when I hovered longer, like a muscle twitching under skin. I took a DSLR photo of the screen, wrote the time in my notebook, 9:41 p.m., and told myself I was still in control because I was documenting. Then, against the note and every decent instinct, I tapped it. The app opened straight to a grid of photos. No logo, no terms, no permissions prompt. Just a gallery of mundane images, kitchen tables and hallways, and corners of rooms that were too ordinary to be staged. In the darker areas of every image, there was a faint, repeating static pattern, a blocky noise that didn't belong to any camera sensor I'd ever used. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I opened the workbench photo. The tools looked normal at a glance: crop, rotate, brightness, contrast. But there was also one labeled clean. I didn't want to edit anything important. I didn't want to touch people. I didn't want to touch my family. I wanted the smallest possible test that would either do nothing or prove I was losing my mind. I used clean and dragged my finger over the spot where the scratch was in real life. The photo didn't change. A tiny check mark appeared in the corner anyway, like it had accepted an instruction. And then my workbench repaired itself under the lamp while two cameras watched. The dust seams slid and scattered. The surface stayed tacky. I stood there long enough for my hands to start tingling. Then I grabbed my notebook and wrote what happened in plain language. Because if I started inventing theories, I was going to miss the next thing. Scratch disappeared. Dust line moved. Surface tacky. Timestamp on camcorder shows it happened. I underlined the last part twice. When I looked up, the tacky smear was already less tacky. Like the world was trying to finish drying the lie.
Evan, what are you doing down here?
Lauren's voice came down the stairs, soft and careful, like she didn't want to wake Emma. She stopped in the doorway, in socks and one of my old flannels, hair messy from sleep. And her eyes went straight to my face before she looked at anything else.
You look sick. What happened?
I turned the camcorder screen toward her. The footage showed the scratch, then it didn't, and the timestamp kept marching.
That's editing.
I shook my head. I held my hands up where she could see them and nodded at the bench. The camcorder was filming the whole time, and the DSLR was already rolling too.
Then what, you swapped the board?
Touch the spot. Lightly.
I'm not touching it. Evan, what is this?
I pointed at the tote. A guy brought it from an estate clearout in Lantern Bend and said not to open the app. There was a note inside that said the same thing.
Then don't open it.
I already did.
Jesus! No! Evan, no! You don't get to gamble with this in the same house as Emma.
I wasn't touching people and I wasn't touching anything upstairs. I was keeping it small and I was recording everything.
No people, no pictures of Emma. If anything feels even slightly off, you stop. You don't push through it and call it being careful.
I nodded, because arguing would have been me pretending I had control.
Lock it up. Or throw it outside. I don't care which, just not in here.
She went back upstairs, and the quiet in the workshop didn't feel normal anymore. It felt like the cabin was holding its breath. The first change was too clean, and that bothered me more than the impossible part. Real problems don't fix themselves that neatly. I double-checked airplane mode, then turned off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi anyway. In battery usage, the app didn't show a name, just a blank line like the system didn't know what to call it. In permissions, it had everything: camera, storage, microphone, contacts, location. Some of that didn't make sense on a phone with no accounts, but the list still said yes to all of it. I didn't change permissions. I wanted to keep variables limited. I chose the cracked back glass around the phone's camera for the next test because it was already damaged and it felt contained. I took a close DSLR photo of the crack, then opened a matching image inside the app. I still couldn't remember taking it, and that wasn't a small detail anymore. I used clean and traced the crack lines. The crack disappeared in my hand. For a fraction of a second, the camera lens looked slightly off-center, then it snapped into place. The glass was perfect, and the scuffs around the camera were different, like the phone had lived a slightly different year of its life. I checked my DSLR photo from a minute earlier. The crack was still there in the image. The phone in my hand didn't match it. I went to write it down, and my pen stopped dead. The sentence I'd written about the dust seam wasn't the same anymore. It still described the scratch disappearing, but the wording had been cleaned up, made more confident, like somebody had rewritten my uncertainty out of my own handwriting. The ink looked like my ink. The letters leaned the way mine do, but the sentence wasn't mine. I put the pen down carefully, like the notebook might react to being accused. Then the app crossed a line. A suggestion bar slid up at the bottom of the screen even though I hadn't asked for it. Remove clutter. Remove evidence. My throat went dry, and I backed out of the photo and went straight to the gallery. The app outlined a person in one of the hallway pictures. A clean cutout around shoulders and hair like it had been waiting for me to notice him. The button under the outline pulsed once. Remove subject. In the printed photo on my bench, the man was there, half turned like he'd been caught mid-step. On the screen, in the exact same hallway, the space was empty, and the wall behind him looked wrong, stretched near the light switch plate. Baseboard line not quite meeting at the corner like the app had guessed what should be there. Somebody had already used this thing on a person, and the world had agreed. I stopped testing and started reading the tote like it was evidence, because that's what it was. The other phone, the older one with the cracked screen, still had enough battery to flicker to life when I plugged it into a pack. It had the same kind of photos, mundane, close, uncreative, like a person trying to prove to themselves that something happened. The first image was a bathroom sink with a hairline crack in the porcelain. The next image was the same sink with no crack. The next image was the sink again, but the faucet was a different model, and the mirror above it had a different frame. That got my attention because it matched what I'd just seen with the back of that phone. The repair didn't come alone. It came with collateral changes that made the repair plausible. The tablet was worse. The tablet had a notes app with one pinned note titled, "If you find us." The text was short. Small fixes work. Big fixes fight back. Undo makes it worse. The suggestions aren't help, they're hunger. Under that were dates and a list of photos described in plain language. Kitchen table, remove stain. Front door, straighten frame. Car bumper, remove dent. Face, remove bruise. Hallway, remove him. The last line was scratched out hard enough to gouge the screen protector. It read, "Family photo, remove," and then nothing. There was a small brown smear near that line, like dried blood. I sat there with my hands on either side of the tablet and tried to keep my breathing quiet. Whoever owned these devices started by fixing objects. Then he started fixing evidence. Then he started fixing people. The note in the tote hadn't been written by somebody guessing. It had been written by somebody trying to stop the next person from making the same choices. I wanted to understand the watermark in the photos, that repeating static pattern. If I could prove that was tied to the effect, I could define the boundary of what it could touch. I took a fresh DSLR photo of my bench. No edits, no transfers, straight off the SD card. I copied it to a spare card, put that card into the Android using an adapter, and opened the normal gallery. The image was there. The nameless editor app didn't show it. It only showed photos with the repeating watermark. That told me something important. This wasn't a normal editor. It wasn't taking any input and altering it. It was operating inside a closed set of images it already recognized. Like the photos weren't just data. Like the photos were keys. I went back to one of the app images and zoomed into a dark corner. The watermark wasn't random grain. It repeated in a tiny block. Identical. A stamp. I checked the camcorder footage of the bench scratch vanishing. It had the same blocky pattern in the shadows of the bench legs where it shouldn't, like the effect had bled into the recording. My camcorder doesn't compress like a phone does. It doesn't upload anything. It doesn't sync. It had still been marked. That's when the shape in my head changed from reality editing to something worse. It felt like selection. Like the app wasn't making the bench perfect. It was dragging me into a version where the bench was always perfect in that spot. And it was leaving a watermark behind, like a tag. I needed to see what undo actually did, not what I wanted it to do. I hit undo on the phone back repair. The crack returned. It wasn't the same crack. It was still a spiderweb around the camera, but the main fracture line ran a different route, and one branch cut closer to the lens. I opened the DSLR photo I'd taken before I repaired it, and the crack in that photo didn't match the crack I was holding now. I rewound the camcorder. On video, the crack that disappeared earlier was the new crack. The old crack pattern was gone from my own recording. Undo hadn't reverted anything. Undo had forked. I looked up and found a small plastic organizer sitting on the far edge of my bench, right where I never keep anything because that's where I clamp wood down. It wasn't mine. I owned organizers like it, but this one had a sticker label on the side that said 5mm, and the handwriting wasn't mine. It wasn't freshly placed. It had dust on it that matched my bench. I opened a drawer and found an empty slot where a different organizer should have been, and the drawer layout looked like it had always been this way. I stood there staring at a piece of plastic like it was a loaded gun. That was the seam. Things that belonged to the new version were simply here, and if I tried to explain that to anyone, I'd be the only one acting like it was strange. I went upstairs to check on Lauren and Emma, because at that point I didn't trust that my little rules about what I wouldn't edit actually mattered. Emma was asleep. Lauren was awake, sitting up with her knees pulled close, eyes fixed on the dark hallway, like she'd been listening for a sound that never came.
Tell me you're done.
I shook my head. I'm not.
Evan, you already proved it does something.
Undo didn't undo. It felt like stepping sideways into a version where the end result still happened, but the details were different.
That's not an explanation. That's you trying to make it sound manageable.
She looked past me, toward the shelf by the bedroom door.
Why is that picture there?
I turned and saw the frame sitting where it didn't belong. I picked it up, and my mind instantly rejected what I was looking at. I saw a hanging planter behind us through the porch screen.
We don't own that.
I flipped the frame over and showed her the backing. The store label was from a framing place in Lantern Bend.
That's not ours. Get it away from Emma. If this is gonna touch her, you stop. You hear me? You take that thing out of the house.
I will. Then I went downstairs anyway, because pretending it was contained by willpower wasn't working. The phone screen was on when it shouldn't have been. The app was open without me touching the icon. It was on a family photo, not the framed one upstairs, a copy inside the gallery, same fall porch, but taken from a slightly different angle like someone else photographed us. I didn't remember that photo existing. The app had drawn an outline around Emma, a neat cutout line hugging her hair and jacket. Suggestion buttons pulsed at the bottom. Remove subject, improve smile, smooth bruising, remove clutter. Emma didn't have bruises in that photo. I zoomed in anyway, because the app had already proven it could change the record. There was a faint shadow on her wrist that looked like a grip mark, the kind you'd only see if you were looking for it. It could have been lighting. It could have been nothing. It could have been bait. I backed out fast. The suggestions followed me to the gallery view and pinned themselves to any image with a person in it, like the app was turning my attention into a menu. That's when I realized the note's wording mattered. Don't fix anything. It wasn't warning me about technical consequences. It was warning me about what I'd become willing to erase. I sat there in the dark for a second, listening to the house settle. Then I changed tactics. I stopped touching the app. I started trying to contain it. I built a box. I had an old metal ammo can with a rubber gasket in the lid. I lined the inside with aluminum tape because I needed to do something that felt like a boundary. I put the Android phone in a zip bag, sealed it, set it in the can, shut the lid, and clamped it down. I carried it outside to the shed. The night air was cold enough to bite my lungs. The woods were still. I set the ammo can on the concrete floor, shut the shed door, and slid the bolt. Back inside, I sat down and checked my footage, because if the app could rewrite reality, the only thing I could fight with was record. The DSLR video showed the coaster test I'd done after Lauren left the workshop. A throwaway ceramic coaster I'd found in the app gallery, already chipped, that I repaired to see if the seam would appear. In my memory, I'd hit the check mark on the app. In the camcorder footage, my finger never moved. The coaster still repaired itself. The seam still appeared. The cause was missing. The record had been cleaned. I rewound and watched it again. Same result. My involvement was gone. It wasn't hiding the effect. It was hiding the choice. That's what predators do. I wrote what I saw in my notebook. Slow, pressing hard enough to leave dents. Then I turned the page and kept moving, because I didn't trust any single sentence to stay. When I checked the page again, the ink was gone. The dents were still there. A faint ghost of the letters pressed into paper. It had removed the words and left the physical damage behind. That made me angry in a way I didn't like. I went to my printer. It's an old laser printer I keep for shipping labels. I scanned the printed bench photo and printed a copy. I signed the back, messy and obvious. I photographed the signature with my DSLR. I put the print into an envelope, sealed it with tape, and wrote the time on the tape. 12:18 a.m. I locked the envelope in a small fire safe and put the key in my pocket. If it wanted to rewrite the record, I was going to make it work for it. Then Lauren yelled my name from upstairs.
Evan!
I ran up the stairs and found the drawer open where she'd locked our phones. Lauren was standing over it with her phone in her hand, face pale.
It turned on by itself.
The screen showed a photo of Emma asleep, taken from the doorway. The angle was wrong, like the photographer had been standing inside the room. The app had drawn a neat outline around Emma. Suggestions pulsed under her sleeping face. Improve sleep. Smooth bruising. Remove clutter. Remove subject.
It wants me to fix something.
Improve sleep wasn't a photo edit. It was a life edit. A clean, cruel button. And it was close enough to something any exhausted parent might want that I hated it on sight.
Tell me what to do.
We're leaving. We drove to Lauren's sister's place in town and slept on the couch with Emma between us. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that outline around Emma, like a dotted line on paper. At dawn, I opened the fire safe and checked the sealed envelope. The tape still had the time. The ink still looked like Sharpie. I peeled it anyway. Inside was the printed bench photo with my signature on the back. The signature was still mine. The photo was different. In the corner near the lamp base, there was a child's plastic bracelet, the kind Emma gets from birthday party grab bags. Bright, harmless, and completely new. The bracelet sat on the bench like it belonged in the photo, like it had always been part of the scene. That was the seam. It didn't tear reality apart. It just slipped in like a virus, rendering the anchor worthless. When I looked closer, I could see the repeating watermark in the dark shadow under the bench, stronger than before. The photo hadn't been protected by the safe. The safe had been pulled into the version where the photo was always like this. The app didn't need to be opened anymore. It already knew what I would try to fix first. I haven't opened a photo editor since that night. I still catch myself zooming in on little flaws without meaning to. A scuff on a floorboard, a smudge on a window, a dark mark on Emma's wrist from sleeping hard on a toy. Every time my thumb hesitates over anything that promises to clean or enhance, I feel like the hesitation doesn't belong to me anymore. If you made it all the way to the end, drop "don't retouch" in the comments so I know you made it. And also, tell me what you'd fix first if you found an app that could clean up a photo and make the real world match it. Like, it starts small, a scratch, a crack, something you wouldn't even feel guilty about. And then you realize, undo doesn't undo. It just gives you a different version of wrong. Really, what's the first thing you'd be tempted to fix? And if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, all that stuff, so you don't miss the next one. All right, I'll see you next time.